of capitalism, where, let's say, less rigid Protestant norms are more important to drive this kind of capitalism of our days. Then you also have important works that extend Weber, that look at other explanandum kind of variables. And famously here, Robert Merton's famous 1950s, 60s sociologist in the United States hypothesis here about how one outcome of Protestantism, that is the English Puritans, German Pietists, was also the rise of experimental science. So when you look just at the religious affiliation of the early experimental scientists, then you notice that these are often Protestants, much as the early big capitalists were Protestants, and that science rather flourished in Protestant regions. The second extension is Philip Gorski's, sociologist of religious, work on the disciplinary revolution, where he points to the fact that Protestantism was also important in creating the modern states and their bureaucracies. He points to the fact that the Calvinists were also quicker to institutionalize these huge bureaucratic apparatuses than the Lutheran or the Catholic states. So the Calvinist free church countries would be the Netherlands and the Anglophone world. The Lutherans are the Nordic countries where you have state churches, and Catholic countries then are Southern European countries and their respective also colonies and former colonies. And the disciplinary revolution is something that Gorski already identifies in the 17th century, so in a way anticipating already the kind of revolution necessary for capitalism. And disciplinary revolution also refers to the fact that something like the modern workday becomes institutionalized with, in a way, the work discipline being trained then in bureaucracies, but also in the workhouses. And this leads us also to another extension. So Sigrun Kahl, she worked on different kind of poor ethics that religions developed, and she distinguishes here the Calvinist and Reformed, again, Protestants, who work with this distinction of the undeserving poor, right, who don't receive any kind of welfare, and the deserving poor. One important element in this distinction is also what to do with the poor. Do they receive kind of indoor relief? So are they forced to work in poorhouses, or do they receive outdoor relief? And Catholics then were different from the Protestants in that they had a policy of basically feed them all, Catholic charity, outdoor relief, no workhouses, no work discipline. Based on this work, then Philip Mano observed that there is a correlation between the kind of confession and the kind of welfare state that emerged in the different countries. So he observes that the Lutheran state church countries rather became these universal welfare states that we know from countries like Sweden or Denmark, where state churches were most important, and where welfare is addressed to the entire population without much means testing, at least traditionally in the view of Asping Anderson, who wrote this book about the three worlds of welfare capitalism in 1990, which Mano here refers to. The Catholic countries, by contrast, rather developed conservative, family-centered kind of welfare states. So think about Belgium or France here, Italy. Germany is a bit of a hybrid here. And finally, you have the Reformed Protestants Liberal Welfare States Association, right, where in the United States, for instance, you have a very, let's say, rudimentary kind of welfare state when compared to the other European countries. Let me briefly, sorry for this, also mention a piece of my own here where I link the existence of these different religious confessions with how advanced the private insurance industry historically was. And I observe in my data that Protestants in Reformed Protestant countries were precursors in the development of private life and non-life insurance, whereas Catholic countries were rather underinsured, and the Lutheran countries were somehow in between. So in my research project, which you can also visualize here, I collected the size of the life and the non-life insurance sector, here measured as the premium per GDP that is annually paid to insurance companies in percent for basically all Western countries, that is between 1850 to the current day. And what you see here is that exactly the free Protestant countries have had a higher, what is called, penetration in life and non-life insurance when compared then first of all with the state Protestant countries, and then both are followed by the laggards of Catholic countries, which are rather at the level of socialist countries, which is the German Democratic Republic only here. One of the main mechanisms of why Protestants developed, or were more likely to develop, a private insurance, I argue, is that, well, life insurance was used to cover also the descendants, so survivors, widows, and orphans of priests, of pastors, and Catholic priests did not have families. The Protestant pastors did have families to provide for. This is also linked with Merton's hypothesis. So you needed science and you needed numbers, also disciplinary revolution, in order to put the mortality tables up necessary to calculate the premiums in life insurance. And all of this was rather available also in the Protestant countries. So I argue. Okay, so with these expansions into a broader sociology of religion, I want to close also this lecture on Weber by providing you with this little tableau again of the theory characteristics. What is Weber's kind of theory? Most of it is explained also in Weber's methodological writings. Some of you might have read this already. We saw already that Weber follows basically the Neo-Kantian approach to science. So he considers then the social sciences as having a distinct epistemology from the natural science. So this makes him a methodological dualist. So historical methods are most adequate in understanding phenomena of the realm of values and culture. His very famous explanation, definition, or let's say a definition of what sociology is supposed to do, contains then, ironically and a little bit puzzlingly, the two elements. So it's about understanding intentions, right? The Verstehen tradition of interpreting human action. But it also contains the term causal explanation, so understanding also the causal course of actions. And this has been subject to broad debates about what Weber actually meant. And as a result of this ambiguity in Weber's definition of what sociology is supposed to do, there is both an interpretivist school that claims that Weber is their founding father, but there's also, let's say, causal micro sociology that's claiming Weber as a founding father. So this is just an ambiguity to be dealt with. So in most of Weber's writing, the explanandum is probably what he explains then the rise of modern rationalization in general and the rise of modern rational capitalism in particular. And we saw that his main explanandums here and elsewhere is institutions, but also mainly ideas. And here also religious ideas in combination with historical institutions. Weber is famous in his methodological writings for claiming that social sciences should be value neutral. When it comes to his own more personal ethics, then in a Kantian tradition, he was probably deontologically motivated. He writes also a lot about virtues, virtue ethics. This is also something that he does not conceive as part of his understanding of social theory, which for him is something positive, something value neutral. I think it's interesting to notice that Weber's ontology is largely individualist. So contrary to what we will see that Durkheim and other thinkers, as probably also Marx, Weber is basically an individualist, I would say, with relational elements. So you recall his definition of what sociology should explain, that a social action is defined as action oriented towards others. But this orientation towards others is something that you can reconstruct as individuals being oriented towards others, and it does not presuppose any supra-individual kind of intention or collective being. So I think it is fair to say that Weber's ontology, similar to the ontology in phenomenology, we will see this as rather individual in nature. Last but not least, his main point in the anthropology is probably that human beings exist as historically situated beings. This becomes most evident when he criticizes the wrong universality claim contained in the liberal Homo economicus kind of definition. So much of how Weber thinks about theory is very well summarized also in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy article, if you want to go deeper. Some of these choices are not very clear throughout most of Weber's work. I leave it here. Have a great day.